Okay, let's start the session. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stijn Daniels, and I'm the president of ICTCT. I'm very glad to host the webinar of today, and a very special welcome to all of you, and especially to Professor Divera Twisk, who is currently associated with the Queensland University of Technology in Australia. Before we start the webinar, a few things that we want to mention. First of all, we as ICTCT are an association that is regularly organizing conferences, and the next annual conference is the one in The Hague in October this year. It's still a long time, but if you want to submit an abstract, the call is open until the end of April, so it's the right moment to submit. And the topic of the conference this year will be inclusive and interdisciplinary road safety research. So please be very welcome to visit our website and to submit an abstract. Also, for those who are not yet very long active in this research domain, there is a traffic safety researchers course right before the conference in Delft, and the program and more practical information about that will follow soon at the website. Then I want to also draw your attention to the next webinar that we will organize. It will be on the 26th of April by Dick de Waard from the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. And Dick will be talking about research methods and tools in traffic psychology. You can already today register for that next webinar through our website. Then two more small announcements. First is about the subcommittee AfroSafe that is hosted by ICTCT. In that subcommittee, there are two oncoming activities, two webinars, and one conference, a webinar with Geetam Tiwari from the Indian Institute of Technology in March, and the one with Professor Fred Wegman in April, very well recommended to follow. And there is the conference in June in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. For those who can make it, can be a very interesting opportunity to meet lots of people and to discover a beautiful country. Then we have a subcommittee, the Nordic Traffic Safety Academy, that is organizing a research school mainly addressed towards PhD researchers in Lund in Sweden, mid-May. And if you are interested in that, you can also register through our website. Okay, and as you have seen, so if you want to learn more about ICTCT, just go to our website, register for the updates, and we promise not to send you any commercial advertisements. We never pass on your email address. We only use it for the communication, the strict communication from ICTCT. So you can register there. Good. Before passing the floor to Divera Twisk, a short introduction. Divera is a professor or she's a human factors psychologist, in fact, and she became a professor later on. She was for a very long time working at the Dutch National Road Safety Institute, SWOF, and then she moved also to the Queensland University of Technology in Australia, but currently she is in the Netherlands. She's joining us from there, which is a bit more practical, I guess, than being in Australia at this very moment. A few practical things before I give the floor to Divera. We expect about 120 people, or at least 120 people registered for the webinar today. That is an amazing amount, and we already assume that that means that both the topic and the speaker are very interesting to a big audience all over the world. So we look forward to it. We plan to end the whole session in an hour, so Divera will get the time around 40-45 minutes. Afterwards, there will be a short question and answers session that is moderated by Alexei Lorishin from the University of Lund. And if you have questions, we will try to offer the possibility to raise your hand and to ask the question directly right after the session. If there are very many questions, maybe, or if you have very urgent things to mention, you can already start writing them in the chat box during the session. But we explicitly ask Divera not to look at the chat box, just continue your presentation, Alexei, and if needed, I will help in summarizing some of the questions and passing them on, so that Divera, that you can focus on your lecture and afterwards on giving some answers to questions that are raised. One final thing is that this session is recorded, so please be aware of that. It will be put available on the YouTube channel of ICTCT afterwards, so you can always forward it to colleagues or people who are interested, or look at it yourself again. And having said this, Divera, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very, very much. So, yes, indeed, I'm here, and not in sunny Brisbane, although that's very hot there nowadays. And this presentation, thank you for joining and for the interest in this topic, because I think it's a very, very important topic and very close to my heart as well, because I'm a very dedicated cyclist. And I've been in many countries to cycle. And I have done a lot of research in terms also of reading other studies from other people. And that's far too much to present a complete overview of everything that has happened in the last 15 years. And if you're interested, we are working with Marian Hagenziker as a first author on a chapter in the Handbook of Traffic Psychology, which will be a second edition. And sadly, I also have to say that there's only one chapter in a complete book of about 30 chapters on cycling safety. And perhaps that tells you a little about the progress that we have made, or the interest which is in this field. So the first question, which is far too ambitious, is to say, what have we learned in the last 15 years? What were the problems that we had when we started? Not started, there was already some research, but I'm looking back the last 15 years because that has been my period in this field. Well, what we found was indeed a rising number of cyclist fatalities and injuries. And there was little understanding of the causes. Why was this happening? There was underreporting of crashes because there was poor crash databases. But what we did see, for instance, in the Netherlands and lately also in other countries, is that we found a lot of injured cyclists in hospitals. So we found evidence of this rising problem in hospital data. The police registration, however, was poor, and to tell the truth, is still poor. Well, what we also saw in those days was, well, actually, I think it was that we thought that was only the Netherlands, perhaps also Belgium and Denmark, that were cycling countries. And so it was not so much a worldwide problem. If it was a problem, it was mainly in Western industrialized countries was the focus in those days. Safe systems, and you know it in Vision Zero and also in sustainable safety, was the leading paradigm with a focus actually on motorized traffic. And as far as cyclists was concerned, the idea was they have to get out of the way of motorized traffic. And if they're hit, they shouldn't be hit so hard. So driving speed was the main measure to improve cycling safety and make sure that cyclists and cars did not meet at high speeds. So that was also the idea, and the further development of protected bicycle paths. That was the main solution that we had. So what about 15 years later? What is the situation? Well, still we have a rising number of injuries and fatalities. Still underreporting is an issue. However, we did get a better understanding of causes and injury potential of certain types of crashes and understanding of contributing factors. So nowadays you read a lot about that. A bicycle is a balancing vehicle, that it needs smooth surfaces, that cyclists are vulnerable in terms of having no protection, and perhaps helmets are a good solution. And also perhaps we should also concern a little bit more about enforcement and, for instance, protective gear like helmets and that kind of stuff. So yes, there has been progress. Yes, there has been some better understanding. However, what I think that hasn't achieved as much development and attention is a better understanding of who the cyclist is, what a cyclist can do, what his limitations are, also in terms of the vehicle itself, the bicycle. It's not only unstable, but it also has certain characteristics in terms of braking capacity. For instance, what happens if the front wheel is disturbed? Can we do something about that? What about the role of fatigue if people, because it still is a vehicle that's human powered, and that means also that people get tired over time. And I can tell you that I'm a long distance cyclist and I get sometimes really, really tired. So what do we know of cyclists as operators of vehicles? And then we have a very wide group that we need to consider. It's a far less homogeneous group as, for instance, car drivers, because we select those through licensing procedures, through mainly licensing procedures. And they have number plates so that we can control their behavior better. And so it's mainly 18 years up to 70 or something like that. That's the group that we are dealing with. Whereas cyclists, well, most people start cycling at the age of 4, so a much younger group. They won't keep on cycling when they are older, longer. And also we have people with, how do you call it? They have problems, physical problems, and they want to use bicycles. And that also requires certain adjustments to their bicycles. And we have made little progress in understanding those aspects. For instance, perceptions of risks, and also, well, I'm not explore that further. You can read that in the chapter that we have written in terms of where the gaps still are. And if you look at solutions, we see that the solutions are mainly from the perspective of motorized traffic. And as I already mentioned, that's also what we saw in sustainable safety. Recently, a paper was written by Fred Weckman and Paul Schepers, who are very dedicated to the safe system approach, and they also showed that the type of approach that has been taken so far hasn't benefited cyclists a lot. So overall, yes, we could have done better in taking the cyclist perspective rather than looking from the point of view of motorized traffic. What we also have seen, and I'm very happy about that, and it's very justified to do that, is a growing interest in the high fatalities rates in low and middle income countries. If you look at the statistics, most fatalities on roads happen in those countries and not in the Western industrialized countries, whereas those countries get the most focus. But that's changing now, which is good. So what happened in the last 15 years in terms of research? What was it like 15 years ago? I think, well, from what we have seen also in the documentation, there wasn't an international scientific platform yet dedicated to cycling safety research. And there were researchers working but they were working in isolation. Few publications in scientific papers, journals, and mostly, if it happened, then it was in the grey literature. And overall, there was little collaboration and little interdisciplinary research. So that was a real gap. I came from young drivers research before I came into this field. And I can tell you that was completely different. We did have a scientific platform. We did meet. We had lots of researchers working on it. We had publications from the OECD on the topic. And there was a huge amount of scientific research going on. So where are we now 15 years further on? And I can tell you a lot has changed. There's a growing number of scientific papers. That's amazing. We have many, many special issues on cycling safety. There are international conferences, and we do see a lot of multidisciplinary studies. So the research field has really developed, in my view. And here you see, for instance, the number of publications with bicycles and safety in the abstract, and the growth over the years that we have discussed. There is a change. And if you're interested, our next International Cycling Safety Conference will be in Japan on an island. And it's funny because I never thought of Japan as a cycling country, but it is. It has a lot of people who cycle from very, very young to very, very old. So it is an interesting experience in many, many ways to go there. What also I think we have seen is a lot of innovations in research methods. And I see that Dick de Wout is going to talk about research methods in traffic safety research or traffic research. And when you look back in the past, before 15 years ago, we had a short period in which we had experimental studies on cycling behavior. That was mainly, so far I could trace that back at the Research Institute in Groningen, working on cycling safety. But that was it. And also they had innovative methods like observation studies. But before that, it was mainly surveys. And here we have seen a lot of innovations. Crash simulations, for instance. Here you see a study, footage from a study of Anna Niska, showing us or informing us also about the type of injuries you can expect from certain falls by bicyclists. And it's very enlightening to see how dangerous particular objects can be on the road, like here. Bicycle simulators, there's a lot of work done on it because we have a problem in cycling research is that we cannot easily get people or cyclists on the road in dangerous situations. Of course, we cannot do that for ethical limitations. And cyclists are so vulnerable that even the risk of a potential fall is ethically not acceptable. So we need to have very advanced ways of simulating certain studies, certain situations. And cycling simulator can be helpful for that. And we have them in many, many features. Some focus on the balancing aspect of a bicycle and how we can modify that. Others focus on how cyclists move into and make decisions in particular traffic situations. They're all dedicated to specific issues, but it is a program. Naturalistic cycling, interesting to see. Of course, we had naturalistic driving. We were interested in how people behave in the real world in a car. And in the last 15 years, we have seen a lot of instrumentation of bicycles to understand their behavior in traffic and see real conflicts of, for instance, e-cyclists with other road users. We did, for instance, a study on speed pedelecs and conflicts with other road users. And so there are many, many examples of that. Naturalistic driving. That was also an eye-opener. Yes, a naturalistic driving we knew already, but naturalistic driving that also in particular focused on the interactions with vulnerable road users were quite new. And this study by Janssen and Farotto based on the U-Drive data is relevant for cycling safety. It showed that although we have been able to implement all sorts of mirrors on lorries, that still when a lorry driver or a truck driver is maneuvering through a busy city, that he often and frequently not explores the traffic situations using his mirrors, meaning that in some way or the other, we haven't found the right solution yet for the dangerous interactions between cyclists and trucks in cities. Well, there are many, many challenges if we deal with research methods and cyclists. As I've shown, cyclists are vulnerable. It gives a lot of ethical limitations. What we haven't seen yet is realistic bicycles shown in driving simulators, meaning that they don't look like matchstick figures, but really show behavior like cyclists would do in the real world. That could be very, very helpful in particular to understand how drivers assess and expect cyclists to behave. And more important, getting in the cyclist's head, understand the world from the cyclist perspective in many, many ways. And of course, one of the challenges that we found in research on cycling safety is the funding, partly because there is not that much money that you can make from an economic point of view. Compare that to studies on automatic driving, which is pushed by the car industry because they have a commercial interest there. The funding for cycling safety doesn't have that kind of a push. Only say the public health perspective and governments needing to be concerned about the safety of their inhabitants. But for instance, bicycle industry hasn't got the kind of margins and the well, how would you say, the interest. Apart from, for instance, now we have Bosch, and they have done some experiments with ABS braking for cyclists and bicycles, and that's interesting to see how they have progressed that. I would be interested as a researcher how that would work in the real world for a bicycle. And I would like to do naturalistic cycling with a braking system, ABS, for bicycles. So far, I haven't seen a study like that yet. But funding and getting innovations going is quite an issue. So what is my conclusion? It's my conclusion. What have we learned? Well, little progress on understanding the fundamentals of bicycle safety. It's still, in my view, car dominated. However, I've seen great steps in research methods, from just surveys to experiments and advanced observations. We have seen observation studies in traffic. I know Alexa did one on to understand to what extent just misses on intersections predict crashes. So we have seen progress there. We have also some examples in terms of innovations that have really tried to build something and to change the situation of cyclists. And I've got some examples, probably there are many more. For instance, here, this was presented at the ICTCT in Helmond many years ago. And here you see an airbag, an outside airbag that catches the cyclist's head when it protects it when it hits the A-pillar of the car, which is really at a high speed, it's lethal. And here there's some chance of survival. Another, well, interesting aspect, of course, is emergency braking. And we have seen examples there at the ICTCT in Barcelona. There are some innovations in bicycle design. And for instance, here you see Sophie. Sophie is a bicycle specially designed for elderly people or people with limitations. And what it does, you can start with your feet on the floor, on the ground, before you start pedaling. And then once you have gained speed, the saddle is raising so that you can still cycle comfortably. Once you start losing speed, it comes down again. And this idea and this prototype might help or reduce the high injury rate related to mounting and dismounting of bicycles. We have seen that, especially in elderly people. That's an issue that is really very injury related. And here, this is my former boss, Piet Noordzij, and he has also been very interested in the balancing aspects of bicycles and to what extent you can protect people from falling. And here you see a bicycle that exactly does that. He has discussed that with the Dutch bicycle industry, and they're interested, but implementation, no, that's not yet there. And here you see all possible solutions that are available and also piloted that might advance and also make cycling more safe than it has been in the past. But this is really an idea from TNO in the Netherlands. So overall, also from these examples, and for instance, the external airbag might be a lifesaver, but we have perhaps nowadays 10 airbags within a car. I even saw that the child seat has its own oh, I lost the word. The safety cushion. Okay. And an airbag, it has an airbag. But the external airbag for pedestrians and cyclists has not been implemented at all. And it's already around for more than 10 years. So implementation of innovation is challenging, even if you have done the research that shows that it works and that it can save lives. So what can research do? We've done already a lot in terms of, we have highlighted the problems. We are able to identify the problems. We understand some of the characteristics. We've found, tested, and evaluated solutions to some extent, and to anticipate and foresee adverse trends. That's not our strongest point, and also not to inform stakeholders. And I will explore that a little further in the rest of my talk, focusing on the point 4 and 5. Because if you look at the issues that we have studied so far, in my view, then that's this area. We have anticipated that the promotion of cycling, because of all the advantages of it, health, climate, congestion, would give more cycling, but also possibly less safety. We have anticipated automated cars, the extent to which they are cyclist friendly or not. There is some research in that field. Electric cars came along, and yes, there have been studies on the question to what extent that would be a challenge for cyclists, because would they use car sounds to identify possible vehicles in their vicinity? Has been studied. The e-bikes have been studied, quite a lot of studies on e-bikes. And of course, the most dominated and the most discussed field, what the use of bicycle helmets would contribute to safety of cyclists. So yes, that has been studied. Mainly these are foreseen issues, and we have addressed that. But I think cycling safety and micromobility in general is a special field, in the sense that the developments are going so quickly. For instance, nowadays we have speed pedelecs. 45 kilometers per hour is their limit. And most recently, we even had fat bikes, and they go really fast. And they are very, very popular among the young people, very young people, 15, 16 years old, and you can start from 12, whatever, and they go very, very fast. And here you see an example. Micromobility, the e-scooters in all the cities, they were there, pushed by commercial interest, of course, but they came very, very quickly. Possibly they disappear very, very quickly also, but they are there before you know it. And here it was, this is Brisbane. And you can see already from this picture how attractive that would be just to be on an e-scooter. This is my bicycle in the corner. I left it behind. Okay. What was not seen either, the food delivery services and the gig economy, all on bicycles, often electric bicycles. And they are in a system in which they have to deliver very quickly in order to earn sufficient money. And what does that do to their behavior? And recently we have seen a few studies coming along on this topic. And here you see the example. Delivery, heavy cargo bikes, they become more and more heavy. For instance, here, even a cargo bike with a trailer. What does that do? How dangerous are they dangerous or not? And what should the design specifications be in order for them to be allowed? There are not a lot going on there. Yeah, what was not foreseen? Yes, of course, Corona was not foreseen, and the pop-up cycling infrastructure and what that did, and what that did to cycling behavior. So, yeah, what have we learned there? Well, we have some limitations because trends in micromobility happen very, very fast. Market forces are leading, few barriers for unsafe trends to emerge, hard to catch through research, and most research is on current trend and little research addressing future possible trends. That's much, much harder to anticipate, especially in this field because it is going so fast. So how can we, and this is the last part of my presentation, how can research contribute to a safe future of cyclists? Yeah, that's really a very important question. And my idea is that you need, the basics is that we as researchers need to know the cyclist, and in many, many ways, in its capacity, in his skills, in his motivation, in his emotions, in his limitations, in perceptions, in strength, in tiredness, in his in rule compliance or not, all those aspects, because that's the basis of how cyclists will be able to, in whatever way, find their way in future traffic. They will not change. In that respect, I take 3 themes as an example: design for all, foresight, and bridging the implementation gap through capacity building. Only those 3. Design for all, as I said, cyclists, there is not modal cyclists, there is not one type of cyclist, there's not one level of skill, there's not one level of capacity. Like, it's far more homogeneous, as for instance drivers are, and we are dealing with children, physically or mentally challenged people, gender differences, also in injury potential, and most important, design also for me, for the more older people. Well, anyway, so safety for all, design for all, foresight. I find it indeed. The idea is that in micromobility, changes go very, very quickly. But some of the changes that are affecting cyclists, will be affecting cyclists in the future, we can predict those. For instance, the upcoming automated vehicles and how those are going to interact with cyclists. And it's very close to my heart to this first question. What design standards of those automated vehicles will ensure that AVs are safe for cyclists and respect cyclists, and most importantly, that they improve the safety of cyclists, not that they just, like what we did with sustainable safety, as long as they're not harmed, it's okay. No, how can we make it so that it's pleasant for cyclists, that they feel happy around AVs, and that they are not threatened by them, and that it's more safe for them? So what design standards will ensure that? And I've looked at some design standards for AVs, and I have not seen any reference yet to cyclists, but perhaps I'm looking in the wrong places. And one of the issues is that once these types of vehicles are on the road, it's a lost cause, because then people have bought them. You cannot say you're not allowed to ride them and to drive them anymore. They are there and you cannot get rid of them. Examples, for instance, safer trucks. It took so long for the extra mirrors to be implemented, to have the underride protection there. And direct vision is still a dream. So, well, perhaps we can contribute by contributing from the start and not to wait till problems happen. The third issue is bridging the implementation gap. We have seen interesting, relevant solutions that are not implemented. And well, I know it's a whole different field. Perhaps it's not even research, but how are we going to make sure that these technical developments that benefit cyclists get implemented? Well, I think capacity building is important there. Inform, train professionals and policymakers. We should not only send, also listen. And we should not only tell them what to do, but also train them how to do it. Perhaps, and I know that's very debatable, is perhaps team up with advocacy groups. Get more power and more noise in this field. Find active stakeholders. I wouldn't know who they are except for policymakers, but perhaps you have an idea. So capacity building to bridging the implementation gap is one of the areas that we can do more than we do now, perhaps. So recap, what have we learned? Well, knowledge on cyclist behavior is still limited. Focus is still on the car driver's perspective. What should we do? Well, the reverse, highlight the cyclist perspective, not only through surveys, but also keep on doing the research, and in particular the human factors research, I would recommend. So why should we, oh, something is missing. I think that we should do all those studies to bridge the implementation gap, to inform policy, to assist advocacy groups, to participate in organizations just as the ITC, and involved stakeholders. How? Well, get the message out locally, not only in scientific journals. That, and this is my last sentence, that is why I agreed to do this seminar, to get the message out. So my main question is, why is progress so slow? Or perhaps it is not. Who knows? You're fine. So be careful out there. What's on the yellow sign? Soft shoulder. To warn is good. to design is better. To redesign is better. Questions? Thank you very much. I stop sharing my screen. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Divera. With
Okay.
a very nice picture at the end. If you unshare the screen, it's maybe a little easier for us
Yeah,
to
I
see each
try.
other.
Yeah. Is it still your bike there on the picture?
No. We found that when we were cycling in the Netherlands, someone had buried it in the soft shoulder. Yes. So it's real. I'll try to stop share. Oh, yes. Now I see the button. Yeah, that's it.
Good,
Hi.
excellent. Over to Alexei.
Yes. So I will be administrating now the question and answers section. So the procedure is like that. We have quite many people here in the room, and you will be allowed to talk, to ask a question, but please write your name in the chat, and then we will just follow the list. We need to get some order into that. So I see the first person here, Deepak Kaple. Just unmute yourself and you can start talking.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Deepak. I'm from UK. Thank you, Divera, for your presentation. Interesting. My question is that around cycling safety. If you were able to do one thing to improve the cyclist safety, what would that be? Just one thing you were able to do. What would that be?
Well, that's easy. That's reduce speed of motorized traffic to 30 kilometers an hour, and make sure that that these cars keep to the limit. And that also tells you what my advice would be to design AVs for, that they cannot speed and that they stick to the limit.
Thank you.
Yeah. Divera, you more or less answered my questions that I had. You didn't really mention in your presentation much about rethinking how we organize our cities. And maybe it should be kind of cycling speed everywhere and so on. But you touched on that now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the redesigning of the cities is really happening now already, and you see cities implemented larger and larger 30 kilometers per hour zones. Limitations, though, is, for instance, Amsterdam did that, and as long as you are not able to externally control the speed of cars, it's very useless, in my view. So yes, I would like to see limitations on the speed in terms of an electronic solution, rather than believing that people will obey the traffic rules, because we know that they don't. Otherwise, we didn't need to have all those cameras on the streets.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Shalom.
Well, first up, hello, Divera.
Hello.
Very much I liked your presentation, and I must congratulate you. You are on the way to developing a very nice Australian accent, much less than a Dutch one. I have two questions. One is I'm involved in developing a Vision Zero project in Tel Aviv, and they're very strongly moving towards more and more cycling and walking. Now, they're still quite far away from the whole center being a 30-kilometer zone. So there are also a lot of higher speed zones, mostly 50 kilometers. One of the problems we are seeing is that we have a problem with the bicycle pedestrian interaction, especially at intersections. And I haven't seen so far good solutions how to solve that. So that is one question. And the other question is on the electric bikes. I'm not talking about the scooters because that's a separate problem. But the electric bikes that we have here in Israel are largely the non-EU regulated bikes that go much faster. And that's causing serious problems, especially when they also move on cycle path. I don't think you have a good solution for that except enforcing. And enforcing is also difficult, but I raised the question.
Yes, thank you very much for this question. And yes, I've been cycling in Tel Aviv, and I've already seen those cycle facilities, and possibly it has changed already a lot. Yes, indeed, what we have the same problem in terms of pedestrians and cyclists interacting. We also had a problem in Australia because in low density cycling areas, it is very handy to combine both, to have a cycle path and a pedestrian area combined. I've seen there nice solutions that seem to work in sense of based on the assumption that people are not completely crazy in terms of that they just go without looking, is to have the surface of where bicycles should cycle and where pedestrians should be, to make them in a different color. And we are starting to do that in the Netherlands as well, because we didn't do that in the past. We thought that that should be a difference in level so that cyclists wouldn't go into the pedestrian area. But that's even more dangerous for cyclists, because once they hit the curb, they fall. So now we also make them more level. And apparently that works. And pedestrians often have the feeling that they can walk everywhere when there's a path, and are not aware of the fact that it's also used by bicycles. So having that, I thought that worked. I haven't seen studies though, but I think, yeah, that and at intersections, I don't have a complete view of what that is like then, because what I describe is that it's on the stretches and not the intersections. So that means that you have pedestrians crossing bicycle infrastructure?
Well, the pedestrians and the cycle path come together at the intersection.
Okay.
And then the question is, how do they cross? And they have to cross each other.
Yeah. I haven't seen a lot of solutions for that. Only, the idea of shared space. Yeah. Make sure that everyone is careful in terms of slowing down. That has advantages and disadvantages, but you have to be aware of the fact that there are others as well. But I'm not so sure whether that's a better solution. The speeds, yes. That's craziness, isn't it? I mean, that's what I described, that micromobility is such a fast-moving field. You can order a bicycle from China. It's in your house within a week. You assemble it and you ride and try to catch them. It's not so hard. It's not so easy. I heard that Amsterdam has now a roller bank to check their capacity and speed, but I haven't seen any effects yet. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, next one is Jürgen Persson.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I'm from Swedish Transport Administration, and of course, different countries likely have different challenges. In Sweden, electric bikes account for about a third of fatalities in Sweden today, and that's a big change in a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And we look at the seriously injured hospital reported. 80% is single accident.
Mm-hmm.
And no car has been involved. But if I think that's have been said before. But if you look at fatal accidents in Sweden on cycles today, we have gone from 1/3 in single accidents to almost half of those who was killed on a bicycle was in a single accident. So we have to have different stakeholders to address this single accident challenge.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's indeed a picture that we also see in the Netherlands, that these types of crashes, the single accident crashes are increasing and also are more often fatal than in the past. I think it would be relevant to also find out where and how those crashes happen, like what we did with car crashes. We also try to find out what actually happened and develop measures from there. Is, for instance, the infrastructure not sufficiently corresponding with the types of behavior that is elicited by an e-bike at that speed? Is speed indeed a problem, or was it the weight and the handling characteristics of those bicycles, because they are far more heavy? Is it because it is used by a different group? For instance, the fat bikes are now used by the very young kids, or is it just the elderly who have problems and get killed? Is it because they ride more? So there are many questions that we need to answer in order to find out what possible solutions might be, in my view.
Thank you. Okay, Stein, I think you would be the last one. Time is running out, so we come quite logically to complete the circle.
Yep, and I will do so because my question actually was exactly about those single bicyclist accidents. So you responded to that already.
Was it a sufficient answer? Perhaps you have a follow-up answer question.
I think we can have many more questions about everything. But I understood that your perspective was mainly about how can research deal with it, which is something else than just giving an answer to some knowledge gap. And I agree that there is still a lot left to understand when it comes to cycling safety in general, not least because the world is changing. And I think indeed that you pointed that very widely, that we have new types of bikes emerging and new speeds, and that really makes the world a bit different. So in the old days, it was just like questioning about where should we put bikes and where should we put cars in traffic, and now it's a whole range of vehicles that are sometimes closer to bikes and sometimes closer to cars, and that's probably also a big challenge to not just research but policymakers in reality. Okay, but I suggest that we try to stick to the time limit. It's exactly 4 o'clock now, so it's the moment to thank you, Divera, for your nice talk and for your encouragement to go on with research. And I also thank all those who were in the audience, and have a nice weekend already. And we will be glad to see you again at one of our activities. Bye-bye.
Bye.